I guess some stories don't start with fireworks. Some of them creep into your life quietly, like a crack forming on a glass window. So thin at first, you can barely see it. Until one day the whole thing shatters. My name is Ethan. I'm just an ordinary man. I grew up in a small town in Ohio, the kind of place where everyone knows everyone else, and life is slow but simple. I met Claire when I was 24. She was radiant. Her smile could soften the hardest of hearts. Maybe that's why I didn't see the warning signs. Maybe I didn't want to. We got married 2 years after we met. It wasn't a grand wedding, just a modest gathering under the warm autumn sun, surrounded by family, friends, and laughter. Claire wore a simple white dress that day, and when she looked at me, it felt like I was the only man in the world. For the next 5 years, life seemed almost too good to be true. We bought a small house with a wraparound porch, just like we'd always dreamed. We got a dog, a golden retriever named Max. We hosted barbecue nights, celebrated birthdays, built memories brick by brick, and then there was Ben. Ben was a family friend. He had been around even before Claire and I started dating. He was charming in a reckless kind of way, always cracking jokes, always the life of the party. I liked him. I trusted him. Maybe that was my first mistake. It's strange, looking back. Now, how the little things start to make sense once you know the end of the story. How Claire would sometimes laugh a little too much at Ben's jokes. How she would glance at her phone and smile secretly when she thought no one was looking. How there were more girls' nights out and late shifts at work. But at the time, I didn't notice, or maybe I chose not to. There was one night I remember vividly. We had all gathered at my house to watch the football game. Me, Claire, Ben, and a few others. The night was loud, filled with shouting and cheering, beers clinking together. At some point, I noticed Ben and Claire whispering in the corner. She laughed, touched his arm lightly. It felt off. But then someone scored a touchdown, and the moment disappeared in the chaos. Funny how the mind works. It gives you just enough doubt to keep you comfortable, just enough blindness to keep you from tearing your world apart. Months went by. I kept brushing aside the gnawing feeling in my gut, the restless nights, the unexplainable coldness that sometimes slipped between Claire and me like a draft through a broken window. And then came the business trip. I was away for a week. Long. Meetings, endless hotel rooms, bad coffee. I called Claire every night. She always answered, always said the right things. "I miss you, Ethan," she'd say. "Can't wait till you're home." The last night of the trip, I decided to surprise her. My meetings wrapped up early, and I caught the earliest flight back. I even stopped to buy her flowers at the airport, stupidly excited like a teenager coming home to his high school sweetheart. It was close to midnight when I pulled into the driveway. The house was dark except for a faint glow coming from the living room. Max barked once inside, then quieted. Strange. I pushed the door open gently. The first thing I noticed was the wine bottle on the coffee table, 2 glasses half full. And the second thing I noticed was the low murmur of voices coming from upstairs. At that moment, 1,000 thoughts raced through my mind. Maybe Claire had a friend over. Maybe her sister had dropped by. Maybe. I moved up the stairs, each step slow, deliberate, as if giving the night one last chance to prove me wrong. The door to our bedroom was slightly ajar. I pushed it open with the tips of my fingers. There they were, Claire and Ben. In the bed we had chosen together, in the room that had once felt sacred. I didn't make a sound. I didn't shout. I didn't throw the flowers at them like some tragic movie scene. I just stood there, frozen, feeling everything and nothing all at once. She saw me first. Her face drained of colour, mouth opening to say something, anything, but no words came out. Ben scrambled off the bed, half naked, fumbling for his jeans, stammering some pathetic excuse that I didn't even hear. I didn't stay. I didn't demand an explanation. I didn't ask why. I turned around, walked out of the house, climbed into my truck, and drove away into the night without a single word. Because in that moment, I understood something so clearly, it burned. Some betrayals don't deserve a confrontation. Some betrayals only deserve silence. And as I drove through the empty streets, past sleeping houses and dim streetlights, the only sound was my own breathing. Slow, steady, heartbreakingly calm. They had already taken enough from me. I wasn't going to give them my anger too. I didn't know where I was going that night. I just drove, letting the empty roads guide me. It was early spring, and the night air was still cold enough to sting my skin when I rolled down the window. I wanted to feel something, anything, but I was numb. I slept in my truck that night, parked by the lake where Claire and I had once spent an entire afternoon talking about our future. The irony was cruel, but fitting. When the sun came up, painting the sky in soft shades of pink and orange, I realized I couldn't run forever. I needed to decide what to do next. So I called a buddy of mine, Jason. He lived a few towns over and had always told me I was welcome to crash at his place if I ever needed to. I never thought I actually would. Jason didn't ask questions. He just handed me a beer, clapped me on the back, and told me to take whatever time I needed. The first few days were a blur. I didn't answer my phone. I didn't check my messages. I didn't want to hear her voice. Not yet. But Claire was persistent. The first voicemail came the morning after I left. "Ethan, please call me. I made a mistake. A terrible mistake. I love you. I don't know what happened. Please, just talk to me." Her voice cracked halfway through. If it had been a year earlier, that would have been enough to break me. I would have driven back, forgiven her, begged for things to go back to the way they were. But something inside me had shifted the moment I saw them together. A wall had gone up. A silent, unmovable wall made of betrayal and broken trust. I deleted the voicemail without listening to the rest. The text started after that. Long paragraphs pouring out apologies, confessions, promises. Then shorter ones. "I miss you. Please come home. We can fix this." Each message was another stab, another reminder of how thoroughly she had destroyed us. Jason watched me from across the living room one night as I sat staring at my silent phone. Another message, lighting up the screen. "You gonna answer her?" he asked, voice careful. I shook my head. "No point. You're a better man than me," he said, sipping his beer. "I'd be raising hell." I didn't feel like a better man. I felt hollow, tired. But I knew, deep down, that the only power I had left was my silence, my dignity. Claire escalated. She showed up at Jason's house one evening. I heard her before I saw her, knocking frantically at the door, calling my name. Jason looked at me, waiting for my cue. I stayed on the couch, motionless. He answered the door, blocking her from coming in. "I just need to see him," Claire pleaded. Please, just let me talk to him." Jason was firm. "He doesn't want to see you." She sobbed then, the kind of broken, ugly sob that comes from deep inside the chest. A part of me wanted to get up, to comfort her like I used to fix things, but I stayed where I was, rooted to the couch like a stone, because no matter how much she cried, no matter how sorry she claimed to be, some things can't be undone. She finally left, her cries fading into the night. Jason closed the door gently and turned to me. "You sure about this, man?" I nodded. "I have to be." And yet, when I lay awake that night staring at the ceiling, the doubts crept in like shadows. What if she really was sorry? What if it had just been a stupid mistake, one night of weakness, that spiraled out of control? Forgiveness is a strange thing. It tempts you with the promise of healing, of moving on, but it demands something you may not have left to give. I thought about the life we had built together, the house, the dog, the memories. Was I really willing to throw all of that away? The next morning, there was a letter taped to Jason's front door, in Claire's handwriting. I took it down and sat with it in my hands for a long time before I opened it. Inside, the words blurred together at first. She wrote about how sorry she was, how she had never stopped loving me, how she had been scared, lonely, confused, how Ben meant nothing, how it had only happened a few times at first, but then it spiraled out of control, how she hated herself for it. And at the end, she wrote, "Please, Ethan, don't let this be the end of us. Please. You're my everything." I folded the letter neatly and set it on the table. There was a time when those words would have undone me, a time when I would have clung to them like a drowning man to a life raft. But not anymore, because love built on lies isn't love at all. It's a prison, and I had just found the key. Still, the weight of it all bore down on me. The memories, the years, the dreams that would never come true. Mourning a relationship is its own kind of death. A funeral without a casket. A loss without closure. Jason sat down beside me, silent for a while before speaking. "You know," he said slowly, "you don't have to do anything right now. Not today. Not tomorrow. You can take all the time you need." I nodded, grateful for the space, because deep down, I knew this wasn't just about leaving Claire. It was about finding myself again. The person I had been before the betrayal. The man who deserved better than whispered lies and stolen nights. And, even though I had no idea where this road would lead, for the first time in a long time, I felt a flicker of something I hadn't felt in months. Hope. Time has a strange way of healing wounds you thought would never close. The days stretched into weeks, and somehow I began to piece myself back together. It wasn't dramatic, like in the movies. There were no grand moments of triumph, no soaring, music playing as I reclaimed my life. It was quieter than that. It was waking up one morning and realizing I had slept through the night without dreaming of her. It was drinking my coffee in silence and noticing the taste again. It was laughing, really laughing, at one of Jason's terrible jokes and not feeling guilty for it. Little by little, I began to find myself again. I threw myself into work, accepting a project that took me out of town for a few weeks. It was demanding, long hours, tight deadlines, but it kept my mind busy, gave me a purpose outside of my grief. Funny thing about pain, if you channel it right, it can fuel you. My performance at work didn't just improve, it skyrocketed. Promotions, recognition, bonuses, they all came faster than I expected. I wasn't chasing success to prove anything to Claire or to anyone else. I was doing it because, for the first time in a long time, I realized I was capable, on my own. Jason noticed the change too. "Man, you're like a machine," he said one evening as we grilled burgers on his back porch. "I've never seen you this focused." I shrugged. "Guess losing everything gives you a new perspective." He nodded, understanding more than he said. And then, as if life was rewarding me for surviving the storm, new opportunities began to bloom. A bigger apartment, a better car, a chance to lead a project I had once only dreamed of. I was building a new life, one brick at a time, and it felt solid in a way my old life with Claire never had. But she wasn't gone. Every so often, a text would come through. Sometimes it was a simple, "I hope you're okay." Other times, it was a photo of Max, our dog, with a caption like, "He misses you." Each message was a stone thrown at the fragile walls I was building around my heart. But I didn't answer. I couldn't, because I knew that if I cracked open even the smallest window, the storm would come rushing back in. And yet, there was a part of me, buried deep beneath the anger and betrayal, that still wondered, was she truly sorry? Did she stay up at night thinking about what she had thrown away? Did she cry into the pillow that used to carry my scent? I didn't know. And I told myself it didn't matter. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. One Saturday, Morning, about 4 months after I had walked away from everything, I ran into her at the farmer's market, a place we used to go together on lazy Sundays, hand in hand, picking out fresh flowers and bread. I didn't see her at first. I was picking out apples when I heard my name, soft and tentative. Ethan. I turned, and there she was. Claire looked different, thinner, paler, her hair pulled back messily, dark circles under her eyes like bruises. She looked small. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The world around us faded into a blur of colour and noise. It was just her and me and the chasm that stretched between us. "Hi," she said finally, voice cracking. "Hi," I replied, my voice steady, betraying none of the turmoil inside. I wasn't expecting to see you here." She stumbled over her words, wringing her hands nervously. "I live here now," I said simply. She nodded, biting her lip. "You look good." I didn't respond. Compliments from her felt like ashes in my mouth. "I've been meaning to," she started, but I cut her off gently. "Claire," I said, keeping my voice calm, almost detached. There's nothing left to say. Her eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them back. "I miss you," she whispered. "I miss us." I nodded slowly. "I miss who we used to be, but we're not those people anymore." She reached out, as if to touch my arm, but I stepped back. Not angrily, not cruelly, just final. "I have to go," I said, nodding toward the vendor, waiting for me to pay. She watched me with a look of such raw sadness it almost broke me. Almost, but not quite. Because as I turned away, I realized something with absolute clarity. I didn't need her to apologize. I didn't need her to hurt. I didn't even need her to understand. All I needed was to move forward. Still, part of me knew this wasn't the last I would hear from her. There was a desperation in her eyes that morning, a wildness. Claire wasn't used to losing. She wasn't used to silence, to being shut out, and desperation makes people reckless. In the days that followed, the texts started again, more frequent now, longer, darker. "Are you seeing someone? Was I really that easy to replace? I made a mistake, Ethan. One mistake. Doesn't that mean anything?" I ignored them, but the unease settled in my chest like a stone. Because people, like Claire, they don't just fade away. They claw. They fight. They scheme. And I had a feeling she was just getting started. But what she didn't realize was that I was no longer the man she could manipulate with tears and memories. I was stronger now, and soon she would see just how much. I learned something important in those months after I left Claire. You don't always have to fight fire with fire. Sometimes you just step back and let it burn itself out. But that didn't mean I was going to let her rewrite the story. No, I owed it to myself, to the man I was becoming, to make sure the truth was known. Not through rage, not through revenge, through quiet, undeniable fact. It started with a simple decision. I wasn't going to hide anymore. I had spent too long, letting Claire define the narrative, first as the loving wife, then as the heartbroken victim. But now, it was my turn to tell the truth, whether she liked it or not. The opportunity came sooner than I expected. Jason's sister, Emily, was getting married. She had invited me months ago, and at first, I had thought about skipping it. But something inside me said, go, face them all, stand tall. I knew Claire would be there too. Emily and Claire had been friends once, before everything fell apart. The wedding was small, held at a rustic vineyard just outside town. Golden fields stretched under a wide blue sky. Rows of white chairs faced a simple wooden arch draped in soft linen and flowers. It was the kind of place Claire would have loved. Maybe that's why I agreed to come. I arrived alone, dressed in a charcoal grey suit that fit me better than anything I had worn during my old life. Funny how you start taking better care of yourself when you realize you're the only one who truly can. The ceremony was beautiful, emotional, raw in a way that real love always is. I watched Jason tear up as Emily walked down the aisle, and for a moment, a pang of sadness stabbed at my ribs. But it was fleeting, because I wasn't empty anymore. I was healing. After the ceremony, during the reception, I found myself standing by the bar, nursing a whiskey, when I felt her presence before I saw her. Claire. She approached slowly, hesitantly, like a ghost afraid of being seen. Ethan, she said, voice barely above a whisper. Claire. I nodded, polite but distant. She looked at me for a long moment, as if searching for cracks in my armor. She wouldn't find any. You look good, she said, echoing the words she had said weeks before at the farmer's market. So do you, I lied smoothly. There was a tightness around her eyes, a desperation she couldn't quite hide. I was hoping. We could talk, she ventured. I don't think there's anything left to say, I replied, calm as still water. But I need you to hear me, she insisted, stepping closer. I need you to know how sorry I am, how much I regret everything. I took a slow sip of my drink, letting her words hang in the air between us. I know, I said finally. I believe you're sorry. Her eyes widened slightly, caught off guard by my acknowledgement. But being sorry doesn't erase what happened, I continued, voice steady. And it doesn't mean I have to let you back into my life. She opened her mouth to respond, but I gently cut her off. In fact, I added, I think it's time we stop pretending that what you did can be undone. Claire's face crumpled for a brief second. Then she smoothed it over with a shaky breath. She struggled for words. I just miss us. I set my glass down carefully on the bar. You miss the comfort, I said. The familiarity. You don't miss me. You miss the version of me who loved you without question. The words were not cruel. They were simply true. She had no defense against that kind of truth. I left her standing there and joined Jason and some of the other guests, laughing and clinking glasses under the string lights. I could feel her eyes on me all night, and I knew this wasn't over for her. It was only just beginning. Later that night, back at Jason's place, we sat around the fire pit in his backyard, the flames crackling and snapping in the cool air. Jason leaned over and handed me an envelope. Found this stuffed into your mailbox, he said. Figured it was important. I frowned and took it. Inside was a simple photograph of Claire and Ben together, in my house, on my couch. The date stamped in the corner made my stomach turn. It was months before I had caught them. Months before everything fell apart. I stared at the photo, feeling the old anger bubble up for a moment. Then slowly, deliberately, I set it down. Jason watched me carefully. You okay, man? I nodded. Better than ever, because now I knew for certain it hadn't been a moment of weakness. It hadn't been one drunken mistake. It had been a long, deliberate betrayal, and I had proof. Proof I hadn't been crazy. Proof she couldn't spin away with crocodile tears and pretty words. I didn't know who had sent the photo. Maybe someone who knew the truth. Maybe someone who thought I deserved to know. It didn't matter. What mattered was what I was going to do with it. I wasn't going to confront Claire with it. I wasn't going to scream, or rage, or give her the satisfaction of seeing me broken again. No. I had a better plan, a quieter plan. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't destroying someone's life. It's letting them destroy themselves. And Claire was already halfway there. She just didn't know it yet. I didn't move on the photo immediately. It sat tucked away in my drawer, silent and damning, while I lived my life. Because patience, I realized, was my greatest weapon now. Let her twist. Let her wonder. Let her break herself from the inside. Out. But it wasn't enough to just wait. It was time to plant a few seeds of my own. The opportunity came when Jason threw a barbecue at his house a couple of weekends later. A lot of mutual friends were there, people who had known Claire and me when we were still Ethan and Claire, the golden couple everyone envied. They knew we had split, of course, but nobody really knew why. Claire had been careful, painting herself as the victim of some mysterious growing apart, some vague miscommunication. And me, I had said nothing. Until now. It started simply. Someone, one of our old friends Lauren, came up to me by the grill, a beer in her hand, curiosity burning in her eyes. "So, how are you really?" she asked gently. I smiled, a small, real smile. "I'm doing better." She hesitated, then lowered her voice. "I don't want to pry, but everyone's been wondering. It just seemed so sudden, you and Claire." I shrugged, casual. "Sometimes people aren't who you think they are." I didn't have to say more. Lauren's eyebrows lifted slightly. The message was there, clear and undeniable. Later, over drinks, Jason let it slip, very casually, that betrayal had played a part in the breakup. He didn't name names. He didn't need to. Whispers are powerful things, and in a small town like ours, they move faster than wildfire. Within days, the murmurs began. Small questioning glances when Claire went to the grocery store, half-finished sentences at the coffee shop when she walked in. The version of the story she had carefully built, fragile as glass, began to crack. Claire must have felt it. The slow shift, the cold shoulders, the lingering stares. Because it wasn't long before I got another message from her. This one was different. Not pleading. Not apologizing. Angry. "Why are people looking at me like that? What are you telling them, Ethan? I thought you were better than this." I stared at the screen for a long moment before setting the phone down without replying. Because the truth was, I hadn't told anyone anything. I didn't need to. The truth was doing the work for me. A week later, Jason mentioned that Claire had shown up at the local pub one night, looking disheveled, drinking more than she usually did, cornering anyone who would listen, trying to defend herself against accusations no one had voiced aloud. Guilt is a funny thing. It makes you fight battles that haven't even started yet. It makes you unravel yourself. And Claire was unraveling fast. I kept my distance. I lived my life. I worked. I traveled. I smiled. I knew it was driving her mad. Then, one evening, a new opportunity dropped right into my lap. Jason's fiancée, Emily, who had always been closer to Claire than to me, pulled me aside after a dinner party. "I don't mean to stick my nose where it doesn't belong," she said carefully. "But Claire's been telling people some pretty ugly things." I raised an eyebrow, waiting. "She's saying you had someone else," Emily continued reluctantly. "That you cheated first, that you abandoned her." There it was, the inevitable defense. If she couldn't erase her guilt, she would try to smear mine. I chuckled softly, surprising. "Emily, you don't seem angry," she said. "I'm not," I replied calmly. "She's just proving everything I already knew." Emily frowned. "Is there anything you want me to tell people?" I thought about it for a moment. Then I smiled. Not yet. Because it wasn't enough to let her squirm. It wasn't enough to let her lie. I wanted her to reach the point where she exposed herself completely, and she was almost there. The next move had to be subtle. Careful. I dug into my old files, into the digital archives Claire had forgotten I had access to. And there, tucked away among forgotten emails and saved messages, I found gold, conversations, photos, timelines, proof that not only had Claire been cheating for over a year, but that Ben had been helping her cover it up, gaslighting me, laughing behind my back. It should have made me furious, and maybe a small part of me was, but mostly, it made me feel free, because now I had everything I needed, and I could finally move on, with or without her knowing the depth of her downfall. I chose my battlefield carefully. A charity gala was coming up, a big event Claire and I had always attended together. She would be there, without a doubt, trying to reclaim some shred of her old life, her old image, and I would be there too, not to cause a scene, not to humiliate her in front of everyone, but to end this, once and for all, quietly, elegantly, the way only someone who had truly let go could do. Because the best revenge isn't just surviving, it's thriving and letting the people who hurt you drown in the absence of your forgiveness. The night of the gala arrived like a gathering storm. I stood before the mirror, adjusting the cuffs of my black suit jacket. The man staring back at me wasn't the same one who had walked out of his own home months ago, flowers wilting in his hands. No, that man was gone. In his place stood someone calmer, sharper, someone who had learned that true strength comes not from striking back in anger, but from choosing when and how to act. I arrived at the venue just as the sun dipped behind the skyline, painting everything in gold and shadow. The hall was beautiful, high ceilings, chandeliers, laughter drifting like music through the air. Everyone was dressed in their finest, smiles plastered carefully onto their faces. And somewhere among them, I knew, was Claire. I didn't search for her immediately. I mingled, shook hands, made polite conversation. Let her come to me, and she did. I caught her out of the corner of my eye about an hour into the evening, floating toward me in a dark emerald dress that clung to her figure, her hair pinned elegantly. She wore the mask well, but I could see the cracks underneath. Her eyes were tight, her smile brittle. She approached, glass of champagne trembling slightly in her hand. "Ethan," she greeted, breathless. "You came." I smiled warmly. "Wouldn't miss it." Her shoulders sagged slightly in relief, mistaking my composure for surrender. "I've missed you," she said softly, stepping closer. "I know," I replied, voice smooth as velvet. For a moment, she looked hopeful, like she thought this night might end differently than all the others. But not tonight, because tonight was for the truth. The event had a silent auction, a tradition for years now. People donated items, experiences, weekends away, and guests bid quietly throughout the evening. I had donated something too, anonymously, a framed collage of photographs. Ordinary enough at first glance, smiling faces at barbecues, backyard football games, birthday parties, all memories of community, friendship. But if you looked closely, you'd notice something. In every photo, Claire and Ben, too close, too familiar, lingering touches, secret glances, moments captured when they thought no one was watching, and nestled, among them, near the center, the crown jewel, the photo I had received, the one of them together on my couch, laughing intimately, utterly oblivious. It wasn't labeled, it wasn't explained, it didn't need to be. The truth was right there, plain for anyone to see, if they chose to look, and people did. I watched, quietly sipping my drink, as whispers began weaving through the crowd like smoke. Heads leaned together, eyes darted toward Claire. She felt it. I could see the exact moment she realized something was wrong. The way her posture stiffened, the way her fingers dug into the stem of her glass. She turned slowly, following the trail of glances. And then she saw it, the collage, hanging in the center of the auction display. Her face drained of color, lips parting in a silent gasp. She staggered forward a few steps, weaving through the crowd, as if drawn to it against her will. I stayed where I was, still, silent, letting her destroy herself. She reached the collage and froze. For a long, terrible moment, she just stared, and then she turned, frantically searching the room, eyes wild, desperate. They landed on me. I met her gaze across the sea of curious faces. I didn't smile. I didn't sneer. I simply looked at her, unmoved, untouched. It was the final devastating blow. Not my anger, not my hatred, my indifference. Claire's hand flew to her mouth. A broken sob tore from her chest. She fled, heels clattering loudly against the marble floor, the door swinging shut behind her with a hollow boom. A few moments later, Ben followed, face pale, muttering excuses to anyone who tried to stop him. The room buzzed with speculation, with pieced-together truths. And me, I finished my drink, left a generous donation for the charity, and walked out into the night, feeling lighter than I had in years. Because it was over. Not just the betrayal, not just the anger. The whole life I had built around someone who had never, truly, deserved it. I had set it all down, and in doing so, I had reclaimed myself. Later, as I drove home with the windows down, the cool night air filling my lungs, I realized something. I didn't hate Claire. I didn't love her either. I pitied her, because in the end, she hadn't just lost me, she had lost the best version of herself, the woman she could have been, if she had chosen loyalty, honesty, and real love over cheap, momentary thrills. And maybe someday, when the echoes of tonight faded and the dust settled, she would realize that. Maybe not. It wasn't my concern anymore. I had my freedom. I had my dignity. And above all, I had my peace. Sometimes silence speaks louder than any scream. Sometimes walking away is the most powerful thing you can do. And sometimes justice doesn't look like revenge. It looks like living well, without them. It's strange how endings don't always feel like you expect them to. I thought that night at the gala would leave me triumphant, buzzing with the satisfaction of having exposed the truth. I thought I'd drive home feeling vindicated, powerful. But what I felt instead was something much quieter. Relief, not the loud, roaring kind, not the kind that demands a victory dance or a toast. No, it was the kind that settles deep in your bones, the kind that fills your chest with a slow, steady peace. The kind that lets you breathe again. For the first time in months, maybe years, I slept soundly. No dreams, no memories clawing at the edges of my mind, just silence, healing, freedom. The days that followed were simple. I woke early, took long walks with Max along the trails behind Jason's house, worked hard, laughed harder. I found myself again in the small, ordinary moments. Cooking breakfast on a lazy Sunday morning, reading a novel by the fire without glancing at my phone, sitting by the lake at sunset, feeling the warm breeze brush against my skin. Didn't realize how much of myself I had lost until I started to find the pieces again. Pieces Claire had never even seen because I had been too busy molding myself into what I thought she wanted. I wasn't bitter about it. How could I be? That old life had led me here, to this new beginning, and it was beautiful in a way I had never expected. About a month after the gala, I ran into someone new. Her name was Ava. It wasn't some earth-shattering love-at-first-sight moment. It was easy, natural, a conversation over spilled coffee at a bookstore, a shared laugh, a second chance born not from desperation, but from hope. We talked about everything and nothing. She didn't know my history, and I didn't rush to tell it. Because, for the first time in a long time, I wasn't carrying it like a badge or a burden. It was simply part of my story, a chapter I had closed. We went for coffee, then for walks, then for dinner. It was slow and gentle and real. There were no games, no lies, just two people learning to exist alongside each other without fear. And in that simplicity, I found something I hadn't even realized I was searching for. Not love, not yet, but peace. One evening, as I sat watching the sunset bleed into the horizon, Ava beside me, Max dozing at our feet, I thought back to everything that had led me here. Fatigue, betrayal, the heartbreak, the silence, the strength it had taken to walk away without a word. And I realized I wasn't a victim. I wasn't broken. I wasn't defined by what had been done to me. I was the man who had chosen dignity over vengeance, peace over anger, hope over bitterness. Had been tested, and I hadn't let it destroy me. That was something no one could ever take away. Not Claire, not Ben, not anyone. I don't think about Claire much anymore. Sometimes, when the seasons change and the air smells like autumn, I'll remember a random moment, a laugh, a smile, a Sunday morning spent under warm covers. But it doesn't hurt. It's just a ghost passing by. She made her choices. I made mine, and life mercifully moved on. Maybe she found her own peace. Maybe she didn't. It's not my story anymore. If there's anything I learned through all of this, it's this. Sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is simply walk away. Not because you're weak, not because you're giving up, but because you're choosing yourself. Because you finally understand that your worth isn't tied to someone else's ability to see it. Because you realize that staying and fighting for something hollow doesn't make you brave. Leaving does. Choosing to rebuild. Choosing to believe that something better waits for you beyond the wreckage. That's where real courage lives. As the last light dipped below the trees and the stars began to blink awake in the sky, Ava leaned her head against my shoulder, and, for the first time in a very, very long time, I smiled. Not out of relief, not out of defiance, but out of pure, unshakable joy. Because I had survived the storm, because I had found my way home, because the future stretched out before me, wide and wild and beautiful, and I was ready to live it, fully, freely, fearlessly, without looking back.